Have you ever wondered what happens when someone with years of martial arts training faces a life or death situation? What goes through their mind when they have to choose between following protocol and protecting innocent lives? This is the incredible true story of Marcus Chun, a 28-year-old black belt in Taekwondo, whose split-second decision during a royal visit turned him from an ordinary security guard into an international sensation. It was supposed to be just another day at the museum. The kind of day where you check your watch every hour, wondering when your shift will end. But sometimes, life has other plans. Sometimes, a single moment can change everything you thought you knew about courage, duty, and what it means to do the right thing. What happened on that Tuesday morning in October would be replayed on news channels around the world. It would spark debates about security protocols, cultural respect, and the fine line between heroism and recklessness. But, most importantly, it would reveal the true character of a man who never wanted to be famous. This is that story. Every word is true. Every detail verified. And what happened next? Well, that shocked everyone who witnessed it. Marcus Chun adjusted his security uniform for the third time that morning, his nervous energy barely contained beneath his professional exterior. The Metropolitan Museum of History was buzzing with activity that felt different from the usual Tuesday routine. Staff members hurried through corridors with clipboards, their voices carrying an urgency that made the air thick with anticipation. At 28 years old, Marcus had been working museum security for 4 years, but today was unlike anything he had experienced before. The museum was hosting a special exhibition of ancient artifacts, and Prince William of Aldermere was scheduled to arrive at 11 o'clock for a private viewing. This small European principality might not have been a major world power, but their royal family commanded respect, and their visit had turned the usually quiet museum into a fortress of protocol and preparation. Marcus stood at his assigned post near the main exhibition hall, watching as additional security personnel took their positions throughout the building. Royal guards in their distinctive blue uniforms had arrived early that morning, conducting their own security sweep and establishing a perimeter that would ensure the prince's safety during his visit. Their leader, Captain George Richter, was a stern-faced man in his 40s who carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had spent decades in military service. The morning had started normally enough for Marcus. He had woken up at 6, completed his usual hour-long training routine that included forms, kicks, and meditation, then grabbed a quick breakfast before heading to work. His apartment was small but comfortable, decorated with certificates from various martial arts competitions and a few photos from his time competing in regional tournaments. Taekwondo had been his passion since childhood, and achieving his black belt had been one of the proudest moments of his life. His colleague Sarah Williams approached his position, her radio crackling with updates from the command center. Sarah had been at the museum longer than anyone else on the security team, and her calm demeanor often helped ease the tension during high-stress situations. They just pulled up to the loading dock, she whispered, nodding toward the east wing where the royal convoy would enter through a service entrance away from public view. Everything's running on schedule so far. Marcus nodded, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that came with protecting both the museum's priceless artifacts and its visitors. Today, that responsibility felt heavier than usual. The exhibition they were protecting contained items dating back over 1,000 years, including a ceremonial sword that historians believed had belonged to one of Aldermere's early kings. The radio chatter increased as the prince's arrival became imminent. Marcus could hear updates flowing between various security teams positioned throughout the building. The museum director, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, had spent weeks preparing for this visit, ensuring that every detail would reflect the institution's commitment to preserving and sharing cultural heritage. As Marcus scanned the exhibition hall one more time, he noticed something that made his training instincts kick in. The morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows created long shadows across the polished marble floor, but, more importantly, it illuminated what appeared to be a maintenance panel that had been left slightly ajar near the far wall. During his security training, Marcus had learned to notice details that others might miss. An open panel in a secure area during a high-profile visit was exactly the kind of anomaly that could indicate a problem. He made a mental note to check it once the royal entourage had passed through this section of their tour. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor outside the exhibition hall. Marcus straightened his posture and prepared for the prince's arrival, running through the protocol he had memorized during the briefing sessions. He would remain at his position unless specifically directed otherwise, maintain visual contact with his assigned area, and immediately report any unusual activity through his radio. Prince William of Aldermere entered the exhibition hall precisely at 11 o'clock, accompanied by Captain Richter and 2 other royal guards. The prince appeared to be in his early 30s, with the kind of refined bearing that came from a lifetime of public appearances and diplomatic training. He wore a dark blue suit that complemented his formal but approachable demeanor. Dr. Morrison guided the royal party through the exhibition, explaining the significance of each artifact with the enthusiasm of someone who had devoted their career to preserving history. The prince asked thoughtful questions about the pieces, demonstrating a genuine interest in the cultural heritage they represented. Marcus maintained his position near the entrance to the hall, keeping one eye on the tour group and another on the surrounding area. The morning was proceeding exactly as planned, with no signs of the chaos that would soon unfold. As the royal party moved toward the centerpiece of the exhibition, the ancient ceremonial sword, Marcus noticed movement near that slightly open maintenance panel he had spotted earlier. What he saw next would force him to make a decision that would change his life forever. A figure emerged from behind the panel, moving with the kind of stealth that suggested extensive training in covert operations. The person was dressed in maintenance coveralls that would have allowed them to blend in with the museum's support staff, but their movements were too deliberate, too focused for someone performing routine duties. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as his training kicked in. Every instinct told him that this person did not belong in the exhibition hall during the royal visit. The figure was moving toward the display case containing the ceremonial sword, and, more alarmingly, toward the path that would bring them directly behind the royal party. The radio protocols were clear in situations like this. Marcus was supposed to report suspicious activity and wait for instructions from the command center. But, as he reached for his radio, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The figure was reaching inside their coveralls, pulling out what appeared to be a weapon. The motion was quick and practiced, suggesting someone with military or law enforcement training. In that moment, Marcus realized that following protocol might mean watching people get hurt while he waited for authorization to act. Captain Richter and his guards were focused on the prince and the artifacts he was viewing, their attention directed away from the maintenance area where the threat was emerging. The royal guards were trained professionals, but they were positioned to protect against threats from the public areas, not from someone who had infiltrated the building's service areas. Marcus found himself at a crossroads that would define not just this moment, but the rest of his life. He could follow his training and report the suspicious activity, trusting that the proper authorities would handle the situation. Or he could trust his instincts and take immediate action to protect innocent people from what appeared to be an imminent threat. The figure was now moving more quickly, closing the distance between themselves and the royal party. Marcus could see that they were holding something in their right hand, though the exact nature of the object was partially concealed by their coveralls. Time seemed to slow down as Marcus processed his options. His years of martial arts training had taught him to remain calm under pressure, to assess threats quickly and respond appropriately. But this situation was unlike anything he had prepared for during his security training or his competition days. The prince was standing less than 15 feet away from the emerging threat, completely unaware of the danger approaching from behind. Dr. Morrison was explaining the historical significance of a nearby artifact, her voice carrying clearly across the exhibition hall. Captain Richter was scanning the public areas of the museum, maintaining his professional vigilance while trusting that the secured areas remained safe. Marcus made his decision. Instead of reaching for his radio, he began moving toward the royal party, his steps quick but controlled. He needed to close the distance between himself and the threat without causing a panic that might make the situation worse. His years of martial arts training had taught him to move efficiently and purposefully, skills that served him well as he navigated around display cases and barriers. The figure in coveralls was now less than 10 feet from the prince's position, and Marcus could see more clearly what they were holding. It appeared to be some kind of device, possibly electronic, that they were preparing to activate or use in some way. As Marcus continued his approach, he caught Captain Richter's eye. The royal guard's expression immediately shifted from routine vigilance to high alert as he recognized the concern in Marcus's face. Years of security experience had taught Richter to trust the instincts of his colleagues, even when the threat wasn't immediately apparent. But it was too late for a coordinated response. The figure in coveralls was now raising their device, pointing it directly at the prince's back. Whatever they intended to do, they were seconds away from doing it. Marcus realized that he had run out of time for careful planning or coordinated responses. The next few seconds would determine whether people lived or died, and the responsibility for that outcome was now squarely on his shoulders. He broke into a run, covering the remaining distance between himself and the royal party in 3 quick strides. As he moved, he saw Captain Richter beginning to turn toward the threat, but the Royal Guard's position and the layout of the exhibition hall meant that his response would come too late. The figure in coveralls was now directly behind the prince, their device aimed and ready to be activated. Marcus could see their finger moving toward what appeared to be a trigger or activation button. In that moment, Marcus did what his training had prepared him to do. He launched himself forward, using the momentum of his run to deliver a powerful side kick that connected solidly with the Royal Guard who was turning to respond to the threat. But this wasn't the threat. In the split second before his kick landed, Marcus realized that his assessment of the situation had been wrong. The figure in coveralls was a museum technician who had been summoned to address a problem with the environmental controls for the artifact display cases. The device they were holding was a handheld monitor used to check temperature and humidity levels. And the person Marcus had just kicked was Captain Richter himself. The sound of the impact echoed through the exhibition hall like a gunshot. Captain Richter, caught completely off guard by the attack from someone he had assumed was an ally, flew backward into the display case containing the ceremonial sword. The safety glass cracked, but didn't shatter, though the impact was enough to trigger the museum's security alarms. Prince William turned toward the commotion just as Captain Richter hit the floor, his formal composure maintained even as confusion spread across his features. The other royal guards immediately moved to defensive positions, their hands moving to their weapons as they tried to assess the nature of the threat. Dr. Morrison dropped her clipboard and stepped back from the chaos, her years of dealing with museum emergencies helping her maintain enough composure to ensure that none of the artifacts were damaged in the confusion. Marcus stood frozen in the aftermath of his kick, the realization of what he had done hitting him like a physical blow. He had just assaulted a royal guard during an official state visit, in full view of a foreign prince, based on a misreading of the situation that would have been comical if the consequences weren't so severe. The museum technician, who had been the focus of Marcus's misguided heroics, stood holding his environmental monitor with an expression of complete bewilderment. His name tag identified him as Robert Chun, no relation to Marcus despite sharing a surname, and his presence in the exhibition hall had been properly authorized through the museum's maintenance protocols. Captain Richter slowly pushed himself to a sitting position, his dignity intact despite the unexpected attack. Years of military training had taught him to recover quickly from surprises, though this particular surprise was unlike anything he had experienced in his career. "What exactly?" Captain Richter said in a voice that carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Just happened here?" Marcus felt the weight of everyone's attention focusing on him. The prince, the royal guards, Dr. Morrison, and the museum technician were all looking at him for an explanation that would somehow make sense of what they had just witnessed. His radio crackled to life as the command center responded to the triggered alarms. "All units, we have an activation in the main exhibition hall. Report status immediately." Sarah's voice came through clearly as she responded from her position in the next room. "Security breach in progress. Unknown assault on royal security. All units converge on the exhibition hall immediately." Within seconds, the exhibition hall would be filled with security personnel from both the museum and the Royal Guard detail. Marcus would have to explain his actions to people whose job it was to protect the very person he had just created chaos around. But as he looked at Captain Richter, who was now standing and brushing off his uniform with remarkable composure, Marcus realized that his problems were just beginning. The man he had kicked was not just any security officer. He was the head of royal security for one of Europe's most respected principalities, and Marcus had just assaulted him during an official state visit. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the corridors leading to the exhibition hall as backup security arrived to respond to the emergency. Marcus could hear voices calling out positions and status reports as the museum's security protocols activated in response to what they believed was an attack on their royal guest. Prince William stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in the way he took control of the situation without appearing to undermine anyone's authority. "Captain Richter, are you injured?" The Royal Guard captain straightened his uniform and performed a quick assessment of his physical condition. The kick had been powerful and well executed, demonstrating the kind of martial arts skill that could have caused serious injury if it had been aimed differently. "I appear to be unharmed, Your Highness," Captain Richter replied, though Marcus could see him favoring his left side where the kick had connected. However, I believe we need to understand exactly what motivated this attack. The word attack hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus realized that from everyone else's perspective, he had just launched an unprovoked assault on a royal security officer during a peaceful museum visit. His reasons for acting, however well-intentioned they might have been, would sound like the desperate excuses of someone trying to avoid responsibility for their actions. Dr. Morrison approached the group cautiously, her concern evident both for her guests and for the potential damage to her institution's reputation. A violent incident during a royal visit was exactly the kind of crisis that could affect the museum's relationships with international cultural institutions for years to come. Your Highness, I am deeply sorry for this disruption, she began, though Prince William raised a hand to stop her apology. Dr. Morrison, this appears to be a security matter rather than a failing on your part, the prince replied diplomatically. I suggest we allow the appropriate personnel to determine exactly what occurred here. As if summoned by his words, the first wave of backup security arrived at the exhibition hall. Marcus recognized his supervisor, James Rodriguez, whose expression suggested that this incident would require reports that none of them wanted to write. The situation was spiraling beyond anything Marcus could have imagined when he woke up that morning. His split-second decision to act had created an international incident, and he was beginning to understand that the consequences would extend far beyond his job at the museum. But, as he looked around the exhibition hall, taking in the faces of everyone who had witnessed his actions, Marcus realized that this was only the beginning of what would become the most challenging experience of his life. The next 30 minutes felt like the longest half-hour of Marcus's life. What had started as a routine security assignment had transformed into a diplomatic crisis that would require careful handling by people with much more authority than a museum security guard. James Rodriguez approached the group with the measured steps of someone trying to project calm while internally calculating the potential career implications of the situation he was about to inherit. As head of museum security, he had dealt with various emergencies over the years, but nothing had prepared him for explaining why one of his guards had just attacked foreign royalty's protective detail. Your Highness, I am James Rodriguez, head of security for the Metropolitan Museum, he said, extending his hand in greeting while simultaneously positioning himself between Marcus and the royal party. I can assure you that we will conduct a thorough investigation into this incident and provide you with a complete report. Prince William accepted the handshake with the grace that came from years of diplomatic training. Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate your professionalism. However, before we proceed with any formal investigations, I would like to hear from the gentleman who felt compelled to take such dramatic action. His eyes moved to Marcus with an expression that was curious rather than hostile. Captain Richter had completed his assessment of his physical condition and determined that while the kick had been powerful, it had not caused any serious injury. His military bearing remained intact, though Marcus could see a slight stiffness in his movements that suggested the impact had been more significant than the Royal Guard was willing to admit. With respect, Your Highness, Captain Richter interjected, this matter should be handled through proper security channels. We cannot allow unauthorized personnel to assault Royal Guards without consequences, regardless of their claimed motivations. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, her concern for both the museum's reputation and Marcus's welfare evident in her expression. She had worked with Marcus for 4 years and knew him to be reliable, professional, and completely dedicated to protecting both visitors and artifacts. The idea that he would attack someone without provocation was inconsistent with everything she knew about his character. Your Highness, Captain Richter, if I may, she said diplomatically, Marcus Chun has been an exemplary member of our security team since he joined us. This behavior is completely out of character for him, which suggests that there may be circumstances we don't yet understand. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward Dr. Morrison for defending him, even though he wasn't sure his actions deserved that kind of support. He had made a serious error in judgment, and the fact that his intentions had been good didn't change the reality of what he had done. The museum technician, Robert Chun, had been standing quietly near the maintenance panel where the entire incident had begun. His environmental monitoring equipment beeped softly as it completed its readings, a mundane sound that seemed almost surreal given the chaos that had erupted around him. Excuse me, Robert said hesitantly, raising his hand like a student requesting permission to speak. I think I might know what happened here. All eyes turned to the technician, whose coveralls and equipment had been the source of Marcus's misinterpretation. He looked uncomfortable being the center of attention, but his sense of responsibility compelled him to speak up. "I was called in this morning to check the environmental controls for this exhibition," Robert explained. "The humidity levels have been fluctuating, which can damage the artifacts. I entered through the maintenance access to avoid disrupting the royal visit, but I guess my presence might have looked suspicious to someone who didn't know I was supposed to be here." Marcus felt his stomach drop as the technician's explanation confirmed his worst fears. He had acted based on an assumption that turned out to be completely wrong, and his misreading of the situation had led him to assault an innocent man who was simply doing his job. "You thought I was a threat," Captain Richter said, his voice carrying a tone of understanding rather than accusation. "You saw someone you didn't recognize in a secure area during a high-profile visit, and you acted to protect people you believed were in danger." The Royal Guard's assessment of the situation was accurate, but it didn't make Marcus feel any better about what he had done. If anything, Captain Richter's professional composure made Marcus feel worse about having attacked him based on a misunderstanding. Prince William studied Marcus with an expression of genuine curiosity. "Mr. Chun, is it? I must admit, I've never had someone go to such lengths to protect me from a perceived threat. While your methods were unconventional, your intentions appear to have been honorable." Sarah Williams arrived at the exhibition hall with additional museum security personnel, her radio crackling with updates from the command center. She took in the scene quickly, noting the damaged display case, the assembled crowd, and Marcus standing in the center of what was obviously a significant incident. "James, what do you need from us?" she asked efficiently, though Marcus could see the concern in her expression when she looked at him. Rodriguez consulted his notes and began organizing the response that would be necessary to document and resolve the incident. "We need to secure the area, document any damage, and prepare incident reports for both the museum and the Royal Security Detail. This is going to require coordination with several different agencies." The mention of multiple agencies made Marcus realize that his problems extended beyond the museum's internal disciplinary procedures. An assault on foreign security personnel during an official visit would likely involve local police, federal authorities, and possibly diplomatic channels that could affect international relations. Captain Richter seemed to read Marcus's thoughts. "Mr. Chun, I want you to understand the gravity of this situation. Under normal circumstances, an assault on royal security personnel would result in immediate arrest and formal charges. However, these circumstances appear to be far from normal." Dr. Morrison's expression showed relief at the captain's relatively measured response, though Marcus could see that she was still calculating the potential impact on the museum's reputation and relationships with international institutions. Prince William moved closer to the damaged display case, examining the ceremonial sword that had been the focal point of his visit. The artifact remained secure despite the chaos that had erupted around it, though the safety glass would need to be replaced before the exhibition could continue. "This is a remarkable piece," the prince commented, apparently determined to maintain some semblance of the original purpose of his visit. The craftsmanship represents centuries of cultural heritage that transcends national boundaries. His diplomatic effort to redirect attention toward the artifacts was noted by everyone present, though the underlying tension of the situation remained unresolved. Marcus appreciated the prince's attempt to normalize the atmosphere, but he knew that the consequences of his actions would have to be addressed regardless of royal courtesy. James Rodriguez approached Marcus with the kind of expression that supervisors develop when they have to deliver news that nobody wants to hear. "Marcus, I'm going to need you to come with me for a formal debriefing. We need to document exactly what you saw and why you felt compelled to act as you did." Marcus nodded, understanding that cooperation with the investigation was the only way to demonstrate his commitment to resolving the situation appropriately. He also knew that his explanation would determine whether he faced criminal charges, disciplinary action, or some combination of consequences that could affect the rest of his life. Captain Richter stepped forward, his movement still showing slight stiffness from the impact of Marcus's kick. "Mr. Rodriguez, before you proceed with your internal investigation, I would like to speak with Mr. Chin privately. As the person who was directly affected by his actions, I believe I deserve to understand his perspective firsthand." The request was unexpected, and Marcus could see uncertainty in Rodriguez's expression as he considered how to handle a situation that fell outside normal protocols. The head of museum security was clearly trying to balance respect for the Royal Guard's authority with his responsibility for his own personnel. Prince William resolved the uncertainty with characteristic diplomatic skill. "Captain Richter, I believe that would be appropriate. Mr. Chin's actions, while misguided, appear to have been motivated by a genuine concern for security. Understanding his reasoning might provide valuable insights for future situations. Dr. Morrison seized the opportunity to support what appeared to be a constructive approach to resolving the incident. Your Highness, we have a conference room adjacent to this exhibition hall that would provide privacy for such a discussion. Would that be suitable? The conference room was normally used for meetings with visiting scholars and donors, but it would serve perfectly as a neutral space for what promised to be a challenging conversation between Marcus and the man he had just kicked in the face during a royal visit. As the group began moving toward the conference room, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in the glass of a nearby display case. He looked like someone who had just realized that his life was about to change dramatically, and the reality of that realization was beginning to sink in. Sarah Williams approached him as they walked, speaking quietly enough that their conversation wouldn't be overheard by the royal party. Marcus, what the hell happened back there? This isn't like you at all. Her question was the same one he had been asking himself since the moment his kick connected with Captain Richter's chest. Marcus had always prided himself on his ability to assess situations accurately and respond appropriately. The fact that he had made such a fundamental error in judgment was forcing him to question his own abilities and decision-making process. I thought I saw a threat, he replied honestly. I saw someone I didn't recognize moving toward the royal party, and I acted to protect them. I was wrong, and now I have to figure out how to deal with the consequences. Sarah's expression showed the concern of someone who understood the potential severity of those consequences. As his colleague and friend, she knew that Marcus's career, reputation, and possibly his freedom were now at risk because of a split-second decision based on incomplete information. The conference room was elegantly furnished with a long mahogany table surrounded by chairs that had probably hosted discussions about million-dollar acquisitions and scholarly research. Today, it would be the site of a conversation that could determine Marcus's future. Captain Richter took a seat at one end of the table, gesturing for Marcus to sit across from him. The Royal Guard's military bearing remained evident, but Marcus sensed that the captain was genuinely interested in understanding what had motivated the attack rather than simply pursuing punishment. Prince William and Dr. Morrison took seats along the sides of the table, their presence serving as witnesses to whatever discussion was about to unfold. James Rodriguez remained standing near the door, his position allowing him to monitor the conversation while maintaining his authority as head of museum security. Mr. Chun, Captain Richter began, I want you to walk me through exactly what you saw and what you were thinking in the moments leading up to your decision to attack me. The word attack still carried uncomfortable implications, but Marcus recognized that the captain was giving him an opportunity to explain his actions rather than simply accepting them as an unprovoked assault. He took a deep breath and began describing the sequence of events that had led to the incident. I noticed the maintenance panel was slightly open when I first took my position, Marcus explained. During my security training, we were taught to pay attention to anomalies that might indicate problems. When I saw someone emerge from that area wearing coveralls, my first thought was that they shouldn't be there during a royal visit. Captain Richter nodded, encouraging Marcus to continue his explanation. The person was moving deliberately toward the royal party, and when I saw them reach inside their coveralls for something, I interpreted that as a weapon being drawn. In that moment, I believed that the prince was in immediate danger, and I acted to neutralize the threat. Prince William leaned forward slightly, his interest evident. Mr. Chun, in your martial arts training, have you been taught to assess threats before responding to them? The question was perceptive, and Marcus felt compelled to answer honestly, even though it reflected poorly on his actions. Yes, Your Highness. I've been trained to observe and evaluate before acting. In this case, I failed to gather enough information before concluding that action was necessary. Dr. Morrison spoke up from her position at the table. Marcus, why didn't you use your radio to report the suspicious activity instead of taking direct action? It was the question he had been dreading, because the answer revealed the depth of his error in judgment. I believe that the threat was immediate, and that waiting for backup would have put people in danger. I was wrong about the nature of the threat, but, in that moment, I thought I was preventing something terrible from happening. Captain Richter studied Marcus for several seconds before responding. Mr. Chun, I've been in security work for 20 years, and I've seen people freeze under pressure, and I've seen people overreact to perceived threats. What I rarely see is someone willing to put themselves at risk to protect strangers based on what they believed was the right thing to do. Marcus wasn't sure how to interpret the captain's comment, though it didn't sound like the prelude to formal charges being filed against him. However, Captain Richter continued, good intentions don't excuse poor judgment, and poor judgment in security situations can have serious consequences. The fact that you were wrong about the threat doesn't change the fact that you assaulted a royal security officer during an official state visit. The reality of his situation settled over Marcus like a weight. He had acted with the best of intentions, but he had still created an international incident that could have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. James Rodriguez stepped forward from his position near the door. Captain Richter, what kind of formal response are you planning to pursue? We need to understand the scope of the consequences we're dealing with here. The Royal Guard considered the question carefully before responding. Mr. Rodriguez, that decision involves factors beyond my individual authority. This incident will need to be reported to higher authorities, and the response will depend on their assessment of the circumstances and the potential impact on diplomatic relations. Prince William stood up from his chair, his movement drawing everyone's attention. Captain Richter, Mr. Rodriguez, Dr. Morrison, I believe this situation requires a perspective that takes into account all of the relevant factors. His tone suggested that he was about to provide guidance that could significantly affect how the incident would be resolved, and Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he waited to hear what the prince would say. Mr. Chun acted based on a misassessment of the situation, but his actions were motivated by a genuine desire to protect people he believed were in danger. Prince William continued. While his methods were inappropriate, his intentions reflect the kind of dedication that we should want to see in security personnel. Marcus felt a flicker of hope that maybe the consequences wouldn't be as severe as he had feared, but he knew better than to assume that royal sympathy would translate into avoiding accountability for his actions. However, the prince added, this incident also demonstrates the importance of proper training and protocols that ensure security personnel can distinguish between actual threats and routine activities. Mr. Chin's mistake could have had serious consequences if the circumstances had been different. Captain Richter nodded in agreement with the prince's assessment. Your Highness, I believe the appropriate response should focus on preventing similar incidents in the future while acknowledging that Mr. Chin's intentions were honorable, even if his actions were misguided. The conversation was heading in a direction that suggested consequences, but not necessarily the criminal charges that Marcus had feared. However, he knew that the final determination would involve people with much more authority than anyone currently in the conference room. As the discussion continued, Marcus realized that his story was far from over. The immediate crisis was being managed, but the long-term implications of his actions would continue to unfold in ways that none of them could fully predict. The conference room conversation had lasted nearly 2 hours when Detective Maria Santos arrived at the museum. Her presence signaled that the incident had escalated beyond internal museum protocols and into the realm of formal law enforcement investigation. As a senior detective with the city's major crimes unit, Santos specialized in cases that involved public figures, international visitors, and situations that could have broader implications beyond simple assault charges. Detective Santos was a woman in her mid-40s with the kind of calm authority that came from years of dealing with complex cases that required both investigative skill and diplomatic sensitivity. She had been briefed on the basics of the incident during her drive to the museum, but she needed to understand the full scope of what had occurred before determining how to proceed. James Rodriguez met Detective Santos at the museum's main entrance, providing her with a security escort through the building and a preliminary overview of the incident. As they walked toward the conference room, Rodriguez explained the museum's security protocols, the nature of the royal visit, and the sequence of events that had led to Marcus attacking Captain Richter. So we have a security guard who mistakenly identified a maintenance worker as a threat and assaulted a foreign royal guard during an official state visit, Detective Santos summarized as they approached the conference room. This has the potential to become an international incident if it's not handled carefully. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Detective, Marcus Chun is a good employee with no history of violence or poor judgment. This incident is completely out of character for him, which makes it even more important that we understand exactly what happened and why. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere had evolved from crisis management to something resembling a collaborative effort to understand and resolve a complex situation. Prince William had demonstrated remarkable patience and diplomatic skill throughout the discussion, while Captain Richter had shown a level of professionalism that impressed everyone present. Dr. Morrison had taken detailed notes throughout the conversation, recognizing that the museum would need comprehensive documentation of both the incident and the response to it. Her institution's reputation for security and professionalism was at stake, and she knew that how they handled this crisis would affect their relationships with international visitors and lenders for years to come. Marcus had spent the 2 hours answering questions about his background, his training, his assessment of the situation, and his decision-making process. The experience had been emotionally draining, forcing him to examine and explain actions that had seemed perfectly reasonable in the moment, but appeared increasingly questionable with the benefit of hindsight. Detective Santos entered the conference room with the measured steps of someone assessing both the people and the dynamics of the situation. Her first priority was to ensure that everyone involved understood their rights and responsibilities before proceeding with any formal statements or decisions about criminal charges. "Good afternoon, everyone," Detective Santos said, introducing herself to the assembled group. "I'm Detective Maria Santos with the Major Crimes Unit. I understand we have a complex situation here that requires careful investigation and resolution." Prince William stood to greet the detective, his diplomatic training evident in his courteous response to her arrival. "Detective Santos, I appreciate your prompt response to this incident. We are all committed to ensuring that this matter is resolved appropriately and fairly." Captain Richter remained seated but nodded respectfully to the detective. The Royal Guard had been answering questions about his injuries, the security protocols that had been in place, and his assessment of Marcus's actions. His military background had taught him to appreciate the importance of thorough investigations in situations involving potential security breaches. Detective Santos took a seat at the table and opened her notebook, preparing to document the formal statements that would become part of the official record. "Before we proceed, I want to make sure everyone understands the legal implications of this situation and their rights regarding any statements they might make." She turned first to Marcus, recognizing that he was the person most likely to face criminal charges based on the incident. "Mr. Chun, you have the right to remain silent and to have an attorney present during any questioning. Anything you say can be used as evidence in legal proceedings. Do you understand these rights?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten as the detective's words made the potential criminal consequences of his actions explicitly clear. "Yes, Detective, I understand my rights. I also want to cooperate fully with your investigation because I have nothing to hide about what happened or why I acted as I did." Dr. Morrison leaned forward slightly, her concern for Marcus evident. "Detective Santos, Mr. Chun has been an exemplary employee throughout his time here. Would it be possible for him to have legal representation present during this questioning?" The detective nodded approvingly. "Dr. Morrison, that would be entirely appropriate. Mr. Chun, would you like us to pause this interview until you can arrange for an attorney to be present?" Marcus considered the offer carefully. He knew that having an attorney present was probably the smart thing to do, but he also felt that requesting a lawyer might make him appear guilty of something more than an honest mistake. After a moment of internal debate, he made his decision. "Detective, I appreciate the offer, but I want to answer your questions now. I believe that being honest and straightforward about what happened is the best way to resolve this situation." Captain Richter spoke up from his position at the table. "Detective Santos, before you begin your formal questioning, I want to make a statement about my perspective on this incident." The Royal Guard's request was unusual, but Detective Santos recognized that his assessment of the situation could significantly influence how the case was handled. "Captain Richter, please proceed with your statement." Mr. Chin's actions, while misguided, appear to have been motivated by a genuine belief that he was protecting innocent people from immediate danger, Captain Richter began. "As someone with extensive experience in security operations, I can understand how the circumstances he observed could have been misinterpreted as threatening." Detective Santos made notes as the captain spoke, recognizing that his statement could be crucial in determining whether criminal charges would be appropriate in this case. "However," Captain Richter continued, "Mr. Chin's failure to follow proper protocols before taking action created unnecessary risk and could have resulted in serious consequences if the situation had been different. While I don't believe criminal charges are warranted, this incident highlights the need for improved training and clearer guidelines for security personnel." Prince William nodded in agreement with his security chief's assessment. "Detective Santos, Captain Richter speaks for our delegation when he says that we view this as a training and protocol issue rather than a criminal matter. We would prefer to see this resolved in a way that prevents similar incidents rather than simply punishing Mr. Chun for an honest mistake." The prince's statement carried significant weight, and Detective Santos recognized that the royal delegation's position would likely influence how the district attorney's office approached any potential charges. International diplomatic considerations often affected prosecutorial decisions in cases involving foreign officials. Detective Santos turned her attention to Marcus, preparing to gather the detailed statement that would form the foundation of her investigation. Mr. Chun, I want you to walk me through the entire incident from the beginning. Start with when you first arrived at work this morning, and continue through the moment you kicked Captain Richter. Marcus took a deep breath and began recounting the events of the morning, providing as much detail as he could remember about his observations, his thought process, and his decision to take action. He described noticing the open maintenance panel, seeing Robert Chen emerge wearing coveralls, and interpreting the technician's movements as potentially threatening. When I saw him reaching inside his coveralls, my training kicked in, Marcus explained. In martial arts, we're taught to recognize pre-attack indicators, and reaching for a concealed object is one of the classic signs that violence is imminent. Detective Santos made careful notes as Marcus described his assessment of the situation. Mr. Chun, during your security training at the museum, were you taught protocols for reporting suspicious activity before taking direct action? The question highlighted one of the key failures in Marcus's response to the situation, and he answered honestly, even though it reflected poorly on his judgment. Yes, Detective. I was supposed to report suspicious activity and wait for instructions from the command center. In this case, I believe that the threat was immediate and that following normal protocols would have put people at risk. Why did you believe the threat was immediate rather than potential? Detective Santos asked, recognizing that this distinction was crucial to understanding Marcus's decision-making process. Marcus struggled to articulate the split-second assessment that had led him to act. The person was moving purposefully toward the royal party, and when I saw them reaching for something, I interpreted that as a weapon being drawn. In that moment, everything in my training told me that violence was about to occur. Dr. Morrison interjected with information that provided additional context for Marcus's actions. Detective, I should mention that Marcus has extensive martial arts training and has participated in competitive tournaments. His background includes instruction in threat assessment and self-defense techniques. The information about Marcus's martial arts background was relevant to understanding both his ability to deliver such a powerful kick and his training in recognizing potential threats. Detective Santos made additional notes about his qualifications and experience. Mr. Chun, when you decided to take action, why did you choose to kick Captain Richter rather than the person you believed was threatening the prince? Detective Santos asked. The question revealed another crucial aspect of Marcus's error in judgment, and he felt his face flush as he prepared to explain what had happened in those final seconds before the incident. I was moving toward the person in coveralls when I saw Captain Richter beginning to turn toward the threat, Marcus explained. In that moment, I thought the captain was moving into a position where he would be hurt if the threat activated whatever device they were holding. I kicked him to get him out of what I believed was the line of fire. The explanation revealed the extent to which Marcus had misread the entire situation, but it also demonstrated that his actions had been motivated by a desire to protect rather than harm people. Detective Santos could see that his intentions had been genuinely heroic, even if his execution had been disastrously wrong. Captain Richter leaned forward to add his perspective to Marcus's explanation. Detective, in the seconds before Mr. Chen's attack, I was indeed turning to assess what I perceived as unusual activity near the maintenance area. If his interpretation of the situation had been correct, his actions might have prevented serious injuries. The Royal Guard's confirmation of Marcus's account helped establish that the security guard's perception of the threat had been based on observable circumstances rather than paranoid delusions or malicious intent. Detective Santos continued her questioning for another hour, gathering statements from everyone who had witnessed the incident and documenting the sequence of events from multiple perspectives. She also interviewed Robert Chun, the maintenance technician whose presence had triggered Marcus's misinterpretation of the situation. Robert Chen's statement provided additional context that helped explain how the misunderstanding had occurred. He had been called to the exhibition hall on short notice to address fluctuating environmental conditions that could damage the artifacts, and his entry through the maintenance access had been properly authorized but not communicated to all security personnel. I understand why my presence might have looked suspicious, Robert admitted during his interview. I was trying to be discreet to avoid disrupting the royal visit, but I guess that made my movements appear more secretive than they actually were. As Detective Santos compiled her notes and statements, she began to see a clearer picture of what had occurred. Marcus had made a serious error in judgment based on incomplete information, but his actions had been motivated by genuine concern for public safety rather than malicious intent. The challenge now was determining how to balance accountability for his mistakes with recognition of his honorable intentions. The legal system wasn't always well equipped to handle situations where someone had committed assault while genuinely trying to protect innocent people. James Rodriguez provided Detective Santos with copies of Marcus's personnel file, training records, and performance evaluations, all of which supported the characterization of him as a dedicated and reliable employee. His record showed no previous incidents of poor judgment, violence, or failure to follow protocols. "Detective," Rodriguez said as he handed over the documents, "I've supervised Marcus for 4 years, and this incident is completely inconsistent with everything I know about his character and judgment. Whatever happened here, it wasn't the action of someone who poses a threat to public safety." Dr. Morrison added her own assessment based on her interactions with Marcus throughout his employment at the museum. "Detective Santos, Marcus has always demonstrated exceptional professionalism and dedication. He's the kind of employee we depend on to maintain the security and integrity of our institution." As the afternoon wore on, Detective Santos completed her preliminary investigation and prepared to make recommendations about how the case should proceed. The statements she had gathered painted a picture of a good person who had made a significant mistake based on misreading a complex situation. The royal delegation's position that they preferred rehabilitation over punishment would carry considerable weight with prosecutors, but Detective Santos knew that the final decision would depend on factors beyond her control. Public safety, legal precedent, and political considerations would all influence how the district attorney's office chose to handle the case. "Mr. Chun," Detective Santos said as she prepared to conclude her investigation, "based on my preliminary findings, I will be recommending that this case be handled through administrative rather than criminal channels. However, that recommendation will need to be reviewed and approved by the district attorney's office." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, though he understood that the detective's recommendation wasn't a guarantee that he would avoid criminal charges. The incident had created a complex legal and diplomatic situation that would require careful consideration by people with much more authority than anyone currently in the conference room. Prince William stood as Detective Santos prepared to leave, extending his hand in appreciation for her thorough and professional handling of the investigation. "Detective Santos, thank you for your careful attention to this matter. We are confident that justice will be served through whatever process follows." Captain Richter also expressed his appreciation for the detective's work, emphasizing his hope that the resolution would focus on preventing similar incidents rather than simply punishing Marcus for his mistake. As Detective Santos left the conference room, Marcus realized that while the immediate crisis had passed, his story was far from over. The consequences of his actions would continue to unfold in ways that none of them could fully predict, and his life had been permanently changed by those few seconds in the exhibition hall. But for the first time since the incident had occurred, Marcus felt hope that maybe, just maybe, the outcome wouldn't destroy everything he had worked to build in his life. 3 weeks after the incident at the Metropolitan Museum, Marcus sat in the waiting area outside District Attorney Rebecca Torres's office, watching the morning news coverage of what had become known as the Royal Guard incident. The story had taken on a life of its own in the media, with commentators debating everything from security protocols to the appropriate use of martial arts in civilian settings. The news coverage had been relentless, though not entirely negative. Some commentators had praised Marcus for his willingness to act in defense of others, while others had criticized his failure to follow proper procedures. The incident had sparked broader discussions about security training, threat assessment, and the balance between personal initiative and institutional protocols. Marcus's life had changed dramatically in the 3 weeks since Detective Santos had completed her investigation. He had been placed on administrative leave from the museum pending the resolution of the legal proceedings, leaving him with plenty of time to reflect on the decisions that had led him to this point. The media attention had been the most difficult aspect of the situation to handle. Reporters had camped outside his apartment building for the first week, eager to get interviews or photos that would add human interest to their coverage of the international incident. Marcus had declined all interview requests, following the advice of the attorney that Dr. Morrison had helped him hire. Elena Rodriguez was a criminal defense attorney with extensive experience in cases involving public figures and international complications. She had taken Marcus's case after reviewing Detective Santos's investigation and determining that the circumstances warranted a defense focused on justification rather than simply seeking mercy for poor judgment. Mr. Chun, Elena had explained during their first meeting, the key to your defense is demonstrating that your actions, while ultimately unnecessary, were based on reasonable interpretations of what you observed. We need to show that any trained security professional might have reached similar conclusions given the same information. The legal strategy made sense to Marcus, though he struggled with the idea that his defense would involve arguing that his mistakes had been reasonable rather than simply accepting responsibility for poor judgment. Elena had insisted that taking a more aggressive approach was necessary to avoid setting a precedent that could criminalize good faith efforts to protect public safety. The district attorney's office had taken an unusually long time to decide whether to file formal charges against Marcus, a delay that Elena attributed to the complex diplomatic and political considerations surrounding the case. The royal delegation's position that they preferred rehabilitation over punishment had been helpful, but it hadn't guaranteed that prosecutors would decline to pursue criminal charges. Marcus had used the time during his administrative leave to train harder than ever, finding in his martial arts practice a way to cope with the stress and uncertainty of his situation. His instructor, Master Kim, had been supportive throughout the ordeal, emphasizing the importance of learning from mistakes while maintaining confidence in one's ability to protect others. Marcus, Master Kim had said during one of their training sessions, what happened at the museum doesn't change the fact that you have spent years developing the skills and judgment needed to help people in dangerous situations. One mistake, however public it might have been, doesn't erase your commitment to doing what's right. The support from his martial arts community had been one of the few positive aspects of the experience. Fellow students and instructors had rallied around Marcus, organizing fundraisers to help with his legal expenses and writing letters to the district attorney's office expressing their confidence in his character. Sarah Williams had also been a constant source of support, visiting regularly and keeping Marcus informed about developments at the museum. The institution had handled the incident professionally, conducting its own internal investigation while publicly expressing confidence in their security procedures and personnel. The museum's position is that you acted in good faith based on your training and observations, Sarah had explained during one of her visits. Dr. Morrison has made it clear that your job will be waiting for you once this legal situation is resolved. James Rodriguez had also visited, bringing updates about changes to security protocols that had been implemented in response to the incident. The museum had improved communication between maintenance and security departments to ensure that all authorized personnel would be properly identified during high-profile events. Marcus, what happened with you has actually helped us identify weaknesses in our systems that could have led to much worse problems if they hadn't been addressed, Rodriguez had explained. Your mistake ended up making the museum safer for everyone. As Marcus waited outside the district attorney's office, he reflected on the strange turns his life had taken since that Tuesday morning in October. He had gone from being an anonymous security guard to the center of an international incident that had been covered by news outlets around the world. The media coverage had revealed aspects of the story that Marcus hadn't been aware of during the incident itself. He learned that Prince William had been deeply impressed by his willingness to risk his own safety to protect others, even if his assessment of the threat had been wrong. The prince had reportedly told his staff that Marcus represented the kind of dedication that security personnel should aspire to, despite his tactical errors. Captain Richter had also spoken positively about Marcus in interviews, emphasizing that the security guard's intentions had been honorable even if his methods had been inappropriate. The Royal Guard's gracious response to being attacked had earned him considerable praise and had helped frame the incident as a learning experience rather than a criminal assault. Elena Rodriguez arrived at the district attorney's office precisely at 10 o'clock, carrying a briefcase filled with character references, training records, and expert testimony about threat assessment procedures. She had spent weeks preparing for this meeting, recognizing that the outcome could determine whether Marcus faced criminal charges or could begin rebuilding his life. Marcus, are you ready for this? Elena asked as they prepared to enter the district attorney's office. He nodded, though he felt anything but ready for a conversation that would determine his future. The past 3 weeks had been an emotional roller coaster, and he was eager to finally have some resolution to the uncertainty that had dominated his life since the incident. District Attorney Rebecca Torres was a seasoned prosecutor with a reputation for fairness and pragmatism. She had been elected on a platform that emphasized public safety while avoiding the criminalization of good faith mistakes that didn't pose ongoing threats to the community. Torres had spent considerable time reviewing the case files, consulting with international law experts, and considering the broader implications of her decision. The case had attracted significant public attention, and she knew that her handling of it would be scrutinized by legal professionals, diplomatic officials, and ordinary citizens who had followed the story in the media. "Mr. Chun, Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for coming in today," Torres said as they took seats in her office. "I want to discuss my office's decision regarding the potential charges in this case." Marcus felt his heart rate increase as the district attorney prepared to announce the outcome of her deliberations. The past 3 weeks of uncertainty had been exhausting, and he was ready to finally know what consequences he would face for his actions at the museum. After careful consideration of all the evidence and circumstances surrounding this incident, my office has decided not to pursue criminal charges against Mr. Chun, Torres announced. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, though this time it was relief rather than impact that left him struggling to catch his breath. He had been prepared for the possibility of facing assault charges that could have resulted in jail time, probation, and a criminal record that would have affected his employment prospects for the rest of his life. Elena squeezed his arm gently, her own relief evident as she absorbed the district attorney's announcement. She had believed that the circumstances warranted dismissing the charges, but she also knew that prosecutors sometimes felt pressure to pursue cases involving high-profile incidents regardless of the individual merits. However, Torres continued, this decision comes with certain conditions that Mr. Chun will need to accept as part of our resolution of this matter. Marcus had expected that avoiding criminal charges would come with requirements, and he was prepared to accept reasonable conditions that would demonstrate his commitment to learning from his mistakes and preventing similar incidents in the future. First, Mr. Chun will complete an advanced course in threat assessment and security protocols that has been developed specifically for situations involving VIP protection and international visitors, Torres explained. This course will be conducted by experts in diplomatic security and will include both classroom instruction and practical exercises. The requirement made sense to Marcus, and he was actually eager to receive additional training that would help him avoid making similar mistakes in the future. He had always been committed to continuous learning in his martial arts practice, and he could apply the same dedication to improving his professional skills. Second, Mr. Chun will perform 100 hours of community service, specifically working with organizations that provide security training for nonprofit institutions and community groups, Torres continued. This service will allow him to share his experience and help others learn from what happened at the museum. Marcus felt a surge of enthusiasm for this requirement, recognizing it as an opportunity to turn his mistake into something positive for others. He could help train volunteers and staff members at community centers, schools, and other organizations that needed security guidance but couldn't afford professional consultation. Finally, Mr. Chun will participate in a public presentation about this incident at a conference for museum security professionals, sharing his experience and the lessons he learned from it, Torres concluded. This presentation will help ensure that security personnel throughout the country can benefit from understanding what happened and how similar situations can be prevented. The requirement to speak publicly about his mistake was intimidating, but Marcus understood its value. His experience could help other security professionals recognize the importance of following protocols and gathering complete information before taking action in ambiguous situations. Elena asked several questions about the specific requirements and timelines for completing the conditions, ensuring that Marcus would have clear guidance about what was expected of him. The district attorney's office had worked with experts to develop requirements that would be meaningful rather than simply punitive. Mr. Chun, Torres said as the meeting concluded, I want you to understand that this decision reflects our belief that you acted in good faith based on what you believed was an immediate threat to public safety. While your assessment was incorrect, your willingness to risk your own safety to protect others demonstrates the kind of character that we should encourage rather than criminalize. As they left the district attorney's office, Marcus felt a combination of relief, gratitude, and determination. He had avoided the criminal consequences that could have destroyed his life, but he also had an opportunity to turn his mistake into something that could help others. Elena was pleased with the outcome, recognizing that the conditions were reasonable and would allow Marcus to demonstrate his commitment to learning from the incident. Marcus, this is the best possible outcome we could have hoped for. You get to keep your future while taking responsibility for what happened. The news of the district attorney's decision quickly reached the media, generating another wave of coverage that was generally positive. Commentators praised the balanced approach that held Marcus accountable while recognizing the honorable intentions behind his actions. Prince William released a statement through his diplomatic representatives expressing satisfaction with the resolution and reiterating his respect for Marcus's dedication to protecting others. Captain Richter also commented publicly, emphasizing his hope that the incident would lead to improved training for security personnel worldwide. Dr. Morrison called Marcus personally to inform him that his job at the museum would be waiting for him once he completed the required training. The museum had received numerous inquiries from other institutions interested in learning about the security improvements that had been implemented in response to the incident. Marcus, what happened here has actually enhanced our reputation as an institution that takes security seriously and learns from experience, Dr. Morrison explained. Your willingness to accept responsibility and complete the required training demonstrates the kind of professionalism that we value in our staff. As Marcus walked home from the district attorney's office, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. 3 weeks ago, he had thought his life might be over because of a split-second decision that had turned out to be wrong. Today, he had a path forward that would allow him to rebuild his career while helping others learn from his experience. The incident at the museum had been the most difficult experience of his life, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about judgment, humility, and the importance of turning mistakes into opportunities for growth. He was ready to begin the next chapter of his story, armed with new knowledge and a deeper appreciation for the responsibility that came with trying to protect others. The consequences of his actions had been significant, but they had also opened doors to possibilities that he never could have imagined before that Tuesday morning, when he kicked a royal guard in the face and shocked everyone who witnessed it. 6 months after the incident that had turned his world upside down, Marcus stood before an audience of 300 security professionals at the International Museum Security Conference in Chicago. The auditorium was filled with guards, supervisors, law enforcement officers, and security consultants from around the world, all eager to hear firsthand about the incident that had become a case study in threat assessment and crisis management. The transformation in Marcus's life over those 6 months had been remarkable. What had started as the worst mistake of his career had evolved into an opportunity to become a leader in security education and training. The advanced course in threat assessment that he had completed as part of his agreement with the district attorney's office had opened his eyes to aspects of security work that he had never fully understood. The course had been taught by former Secret Service agents, diplomatic security specialists, and behavioral analysts who had spent their careers protecting high-profile individuals in complex environments. Marcus had learned about the psychology of threat assessment, the importance of information sharing between different security teams, and the critical role that proper communication plays in preventing misunderstandings that can lead to unnecessary confrontations. The most important lesson I learned, Marcus had told his instructor during the final week of the course, is that good intentions without proper information can be just as dangerous as malicious intent with good information. His community service work had been equally transformative. Marcus had spent his required 100 hours training security volunteers at community centers, schools, and nonprofit organizations throughout the city. The experience had taught him how to communicate complex security concepts to people without formal training, a skill that proved invaluable in his new role as a security educator. One of his most rewarding assignments had been working with the staff at a women's shelter, helping them develop protocols for recognizing and responding to potential threats while maintaining the welcoming environment that was essential to their mission. The staff members had been eager to learn, and Marcus had found deep satisfaction in helping them feel more confident about protecting the vulnerable people they served. Marcus brought a level of expertise and empathy to our training that transformed how we think about security, the shelter director had written in a letter of recommendation. His experience taught him humility, and his humility made him an exceptional teacher. The most challenging aspect of Marcus's rehabilitation had been preparing for the public presentation he was about to give. Speaking about his mistake in front of hundreds of security professionals required a level of vulnerability that pushed him far outside his comfort zone. He had spent weeks working with a public speaking coach, practicing how to tell his story in a way that would be both honest about his failures and helpful to his audience. Elena Rodriguez had remained involved throughout Marcus's rehabilitation, helping him navigate the legal and professional requirements while building a new career around his experience. She had been impressed by how he had transformed a potentially career-ending mistake into an opportunity for growth and service. Marcus, What you've accomplished over the past 6 months demonstrates remarkable resilience and character, Elena had told him during their final meeting. You've turned one of the worst days of your life into a foundation for helping others avoid similar mistakes. Dr. Morrison had welcomed Marcus back to the museum with enthusiasm, but his role had evolved significantly from his original position as a security guard. He now served as the museum's director of security training, responsible for developing and implementing educational programs for both staff and visiting security professionals. The museum had become a leader in security education, hosting workshops and conferences that drew participants from around the world. Marcus's story had become a central part of their training curriculum, demonstrating the importance of continuous learning and improvement in security practices. James Rodriguez had been promoted to Deputy Director of Security, working closely with Marcus to implement the improved protocols and communication systems that had been developed in response to the royal visit incident. The partnership between Rodriguez's administrative experience and Marcus's newfound expertise in training had created one of the most respected security programs in the museum field. What happened 6 months ago was a crisis, Rodriguez often told visitors to the museum's security training center. What Marcus has done with that crisis is a testament to the power of turning mistakes into learning opportunities. Captain Richter had maintained contact with Marcus throughout his rehabilitation, providing guidance and encouragement as the former security guard developed his expertise in threat assessment and crisis management. The Royal Guard had become an unofficial mentor, sharing insights from his decades of experience in protecting high-profile individuals in challenging environments. Mr. Chun, your willingness to admit your mistakes and learn from them demonstrates the kind of integrity that makes for exceptional security professionals, Captain Richter had written in a letter of recommendation that had helped Marcus secure his new position at the museum. Prince William had also followed Marcus's progress, expressing satisfaction with how the incident had been transformed into an opportunity for improvement in security practices. The prince's delegation had nominated Marcus for a civilian honor recognizing his contributions to international security cooperation, an award that would be presented at a ceremony the following month. Sarah Williams had been one of Marcus's strongest supporters throughout his rehabilitation, celebrating each milestone and encouraging him during the difficult moments when the weight of public attention and professional pressure had felt overwhelming. She had watched him grow from someone devastated by a mistake into a leader who could help others avoid similar problems. Marcus, you've become the person I always knew you could be, Sarah had told him before his departure for the Chicago conference. Your experience has given you wisdom that you never could have gained any other way. As Marcus approached the podium to begin his presentation, he felt the familiar nervousness that came with public speaking, but also a deep sense of purpose. His story could help the security professionals in the audience understand the importance of proper training, clear communication, and humility in their work. 6 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my career, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly throughout the auditorium. I kicked a royal guard in the face during an official state visit because I misinterpreted a routine maintenance situation as an imminent threat to public safety. The audience leaned forward, engaged by the direct and honest opening of his presentation. Marcus had learned that the best way to discuss his mistake was to be completely forthright about what had happened and why it had occurred. Today, I want to share with you what I've learned from that mistake, not because I'm proud of what I did, but because the lessons I've learned might help you avoid making similar errors in judgment that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. Over the next 45 minutes, Marcus walked his audience through the entire incident, from his initial observations of the maintenance panel to the moment his kick connected with Captain Richter's chest. He explained his thought process at each stage, highlighting the assumptions and misinterpretations that had led to his decision to act without gathering complete information. The most important lesson I learned is that threat assessment is not just about recognizing danger, Marcus explained during the middle section of his presentation. It's about gathering enough information to distinguish between actual threats and situations that only appear threatening because we don't understand what we're observing. He discussed the improved communication protocols that had been implemented at the museum, the advanced training he had received in threat assessment, and the community service work that had taught him how to share security knowledge with non-professionals who needed practical guidance. My mistake hurt people, damaged relationships, and created unnecessary chaos during what should have been a peaceful cultural exchange, Marcus said as he approached the conclusion of his presentation. But It also taught me that our responsibility as security professionals extends beyond just protecting people from harm. We have a responsibility to ensure that our protective actions don't create new forms of harm based on misunderstandings or incomplete information. The audience responded with sustained applause as Marcus concluded his presentation, recognizing both his honesty in discussing his mistakes and his commitment to helping others learn from his experience. During the question and answer session that followed, security professionals from around the world asked for his insights on training protocols, communication systems, and the psychological aspects of threat assessment. One question came from a museum security supervisor in Australia who had been following Marcus's story since the initial incident. Mr. Chun, how do we balance the need for quick action in genuine emergencies with the importance of gathering complete information before responding to potential threats? Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. That's the central challenge we face as security professionals. My experience taught me that the key is improving our ability to rapidly assess and interpret what we're observing. We need better training in recognizing the difference between situations that require immediate action and situations that require immediate investigation. Another question came from a federal law enforcement officer who worked in diplomatic security. Mr. Chun, what advice would you give to someone who finds themselves in a situation where they have to choose between following protocol and taking action to protect people? My advice is to remember that proper protocols exist to prevent the kind of mistake I made, Marcus replied. If you believe that following protocol will result in people being harmed, you need to communicate that assessment to your superiors and colleagues immediately. In most cases, there are ways to address urgent situations without abandoning the systems that are designed to prevent misunderstandings. As the conference session concluded, Marcus was approached by dozens of security professionals who wanted to discuss his presentation in more detail. Many shared their own experiences with difficult judgment calls and expressed appreciation for his willingness to discuss his mistake so openly. Dr. Angela Foster, the conference organizer and a professor of criminology at Northwestern University, approached Marcus as the auditorium began to empty. Mr. Chun, that was one of the most powerful presentations we've ever had at this conference. Would you be willing to develop this material into a workshop that we could offer at future events? The invitation represented another opportunity for Marcus to expand his impact on security education and training. He had already received similar requests from organizations around the world, all eager to learn from his experience and incorporate his insights into their own training programs. Dr. Foster, I would be honored to develop a workshop based on this material, Marcus replied. I believe that sharing experiences, both positive and negative, is one of the most effective ways to improve security practices across all types of organizations. As Marcus left the conference center that evening, he reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought him from a moment of crisis to a position of leadership in his field. The incident at the museum had been the most difficult experience of his life, but it had also revealed strengths and capabilities that he never knew he possessed. His phone buzzed with text messages from colleagues and friends who had watched the live stream of his presentation online. Sarah Williams had sent a message saying, "Proud of you," with several heart emojis. Dr. Morrison had written, "Outstanding presentation. You've made us all proud." Even Captain Richter had sent a message, "Well done, Mr. Chun. Your growth has been remarkable to witness." The transformation in Marcus's life over the past 6 months had been profound, but he understood that it was really just the beginning of a new chapter in his career. He had discovered a passion for education and training that extended far beyond his original role as a museum security guard. His mistake had shocked everyone who witnessed it, including himself. But what happened next, his commitment to learning, growing, and helping others avoid similar mistakes, had created something positive from what could have been simply a cautionary tale about the dangers of poor judgment. As Marcus boarded his flight back home, he knew that his story would continue to evolve in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But he was confident that whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, he would face them with the wisdom that comes from understanding both the importance of good intentions and the critical necessity of making sure those intentions are guided by accurate information and proper training. The young man who had kicked a royal guard in the face 6 months ago had been transformed into a leader who could help others navigate the complex challenges of protecting people in an increasingly complicated world. And that transformation was perhaps the most shocking outcome of all.